Okay, so I got a little correction. Made a mistake yesterday when I was doing my video. I was really focused on the line pressure issue. I kind of glazed over the actual code that it sets repeatedly every single time. Um, I made a couple comments about a cross leaking fluid, which is why the torque converter clutch and the other stuff that I explained in the video yesterday. I was watching the video again and I realized that my mistake was the data screen that I was showing and that I was looking at, because I kind of glazed over this problem, this actual shift rationality code or switch rationality fault. Uh, so I kind of glazed over that because I was more focused on the line pressure issue and proving that the line pressure was a fault in the transmission. So this morning I got up and was watching the video again, and I realized I was looking at the wrong data. So I printed out the diagnostics again for my P0988 4C pressure switch rationality. The pressure switch rationality, basically it says DTC set condition. DTC is set if the 4C pressure switch reads open or closed at the wrong time in a given gear. I went through some of this. Right away it wants you to log the fault data, and for some reason my Solus on this vehicle is not giving me what I normally call a freeze frame. I'm assuming that's what all data is wanting, because they keep referring to this event data. I don't have any event data stored. I'm assuming they're talking about freeze frame. So what I did was I hooked up to the 4C pressure switch and the 4C clutch solenoid this morning. I didn't get much of that on video. I got some of it. And the 4C pressure switch comes on. I was expecting to see it come on in second. I was kind of scratching my head. Like, the hard part about it is as soon as the fault happens, the computer turns everything off to put the transmission into failsafe limp mode, which is fourth gear only, zero control to the transmission. So what I ended up realizing was I'm watching the correct data, and it was hard to see. I was recording the data screen with my cell phone, which I've been doing most of this with, trying to drive and watch the scanners and everything. So I'm watching the data screen, and this, I'm going to go back to my diagrams here. I'm going to flip it around and show you. So I'm looking at this chart, and my wife Sarah's in the truck helping me watch. She's trying to watch the data and tell me what it's doing while I'm watching my little oscilloscope, and it's hooked up to the pressure solenoid for that clutch. And then I have my meter hooked up to the 4C clutch circuit with a jumper wire, and if I attach that jumper wire to a ground signal, I can make the data screen on the scanner change. So I can see that 4C pressure switch opens and closes. I'm tapped in right at the transmission. So I start it up. I have 10 volts, 12 volts out of the computer when it's running at idle. I don't know why it's not battery voltage, but it's actually a signal output from the PCM. So I imagine it's a fixed controlled 12 volt signal. Basically goes to a switch. It's switched to ground. When fluid pressure closes the switch, it knows it's applied. It's pretty simple. Applies it applies a ground, so the computer loses that 12 volt potential, and it sees that 12 volt potential go to ground, and it realizes, okay, that switch was closed. Or there's a short, and it's always switched. See, if I attach that wire and I manipulate that circuit and I make that switch stay on all the time, you start it up, put it in gear, it's immediately has a fault, because that switch should not be closed. It should not be on. I'm going to turn the camera around and show you real quick what I did. And I caught it on accident. Well, not really on accident, but I was filming my scanner while I was driving, and it's hard for me to watch it. I had to go back and slow the video down because it happens really quick. We may be able to catch it on the scanner. I'm going to try. I want to go through this real quick, so I'm going to turn my camera around. Okay, so here's my diagnostics. We're going to do this too. I'm going to back out of here, go back to the scanner. I'm going to show you the codes. We're going to focus on this rationality fault. Turn this off, turn the key on, reset these codes. Okay. Do we have codes? No codes present. I'm going to turn the key off here for a second. So, here is our P0988 4C pressure switch rationality. Transmission system uses 5 pressure switches to monitor the fluid pressure in the said circuits. Continuously monitored for the correct status in each gear as shown. And I'll show you what they mean by as shown. Set condition. DTC is set if the 4C pressure switch reads open or closed at the wrong time in a given gear. Okay. That's very specific. DTC is set if 4C pressure switch reads open or closed at the wrong time in a given gear. So, back to what they mean by in each gear as shown. Here's the chart that they give. Here we have gear, reverse, parker neutral, first. So this truck only has drive. The rest of it is a manual shift on the column. The shifter physically doesn't go past drive. So the only way you get any of this other stuff to happen is computer turning on the solenoids. The feedback, the way that the computer reads the feedback is these pressure switches. So it turns on a solenoid to put fluid pressure to, let's see, it happens every single time we go from first gear to second gear. Low reverse is supposed to go from closed to open. That would be low and reverse clutch. 2C pressure switch is supposed to close in second gear. 4C pressure switch should be open. And then underdrive is closed. So that one's on and that one is on. At no time should these be on at the same time in any position. It's either one or the other. They're either both off or one or the other one is turned on. At no point are they both turned on at the same time. So, turn this on. Double check, make sure our codes are gone. No codes. Alright. I'm going to go to the data. I'm going to make it real quick. That's very, very simple language right there from All Data. And All Data gets their information from the manufacturer. I'm going to go up here. I'm going to select just what I want. Get rid of all that. Go back here. Now, we're going to go down here. And because I don't have for whatever reason, I don't get a second gear, I don't get a 2C clutch switch. For second, I get, basically it tells me if it's on or off, if it's applied or not. But we're going to look at that. We're going to look at this 4C clutch, and then the 4C clutch pressure switch. The reason, I'm assuming they work the same way. I have the stuff, everything I have right here tells me it works the same way as the other switch. So when the switch closes, it says applied. when the switch opens, it's not applied. It takes fluid pressure to close the switch, which I have a schematic here somewhere. There it is. There's my schematic. There is your pressure switches. Typically they're all open. It takes fluid pressure to make them close. The computer is putting out a voltage signal from the computer to these lines, to this switch assembly. When fluid pressure is applied to one of these switches, it closes that switch and it applies a ground path, which takes away this voltage potential signal. Okay, I may be reading that wrong actually. It's getting a power signal here and it goes through this resistor, which is part of the transmission internals. It feeds these resistors. These resistors are where the power is going back. So still on this side of the resistor you have potential voltage. Either way, same operation. Your 4C clutch. 4C clutch gets closed by pressure. It goes to ground. This wire loses potential voltage. The computer sees this signal go from voltage to no voltage and knows that switch closed. This right here, neither one should be on at the same time. This says clearly right here, set conditions. DTC is set if the 4C pressure switch reads open or closed at the wrong time in a given gear. Okay, start it up. Actually, we're going to do this too. So it does not set the code or do anything weird. I didn't need to do that. I'm going to go back and just do it this way. 2C clutch, 4C clutch, and 4C pressure switch. And we're going to look at that. So clearly it's open. The only time it's supposed to close, not supposed to close until later. Alright, let's go for a drive. And every time it does it, every time you start it, it lets you drive until it messes up. First time, as soon as it messes up, you're in limp mode and you're stuck in. It just goes right to fourth gear. It takes forever to go into gear. Let's see if I can get where we can see this. And the only time this happens, here's what we're looking at. 2C, 4C, 4C pressure switch. Not applied because the switches are open. Getting to where the sun's going to be in our eyes here. Alright, I gotta get this. Let's see if we can catch it, do it. I'm gonna go now. Shift. It didn't do it that time. There it goes, see it? Right there, it went into limp mode. And you see that other switch came on? And then it goes into fourth gear. It didn't do it. It took it a second to do it that time. That's kind of getting scary, like maybe we're starting to really have line pressure issues really bad. But neither one should be on at the same time, and then the other one comes on for a split second, and then as soon as that happens, you barely catch it with the scanner. It's barely long enough for the sample rate on the scanner to pick it up. I think we got it. So look, there's not even a check engine light. we're in fourth gear. No, it was in fourth gear. Shut it off. Start it back up. Back to my data screen. Barely rolling. Here we go. It's the easy acceleration. I'm in the neighborhood. Okay, second. Closed. Closed. See that? Oh, now we're, look, that fast. That's all it took, and now it's in limp mode already. You can tell because it goes from this fourth gear and then the little light comes on instead of the D. That's as fast as it takes right there. And now we have a solid check engine light on. I'm gonna let it do it one more time so we can catch it, hopefully. Well, hopefully. I know it'll do it again. I'm surprised there. That time it actually, it went into second gear for a second. But I think that's only because the line pressure was down far enough. Let's see if it set line pressure codes when we get back. Okay, still have a check engine. It still went back to D. Let's see if it does it again. Well, I know it will. See, we're back to first gear. It doesn't pick up any issue until it wants to do a second gear shift. Shift. See? That's what it does every time. I stayed on it a little long. I gotta back up. So yeah, and then it goes into once it goes into limp mode, like I was explaining in the other video, it goes into limp mode. It just literally it shuts down all control. And the reason that this will stay stuck at closed is because on the diagram, I was reading the diagram wrong. So your integrated power module, one of the areas that is fed by that, which is the circuit, the battery power circuit that I was looking at yesterday, feeds down here to the transmission. So it is actually feeding power through those resistors, and the signal is going to the computer. So when the computer goes into fault mode and it turns off the this transmission control output, see how it's all of those? That way the computer can tell if that voltage is low. It will set that code. The code that he tells me it had, which it doesn't have. It has if you, I don't know if there's a fuse for it or not, either way. So that comes down here, plugs into the transmission assembly. This is the wire in my other video that had 12 volts or battery voltage all the time. That feeds these, so these resistors. This is basically resistor right here. So we have voltage on that side. The wires are hooked up to the computer, to the other side of the resistor. They get a voltage signal to the computer. When this switch is closed by pressure, the computer watches those switches go, or these voltages go away. If it goes away, it's assuming that it has pressure and a closed switch. So if it commands the pressure to go to another point, like say it turns on the 4C or the 2C clutch, and the way I understand it, that's slipping. It can't even climb the driveway. It's still in fourth gear. Let me cycle it so it'll go back to first gear and it'll drive up my driveway. So yeah, diagnosing this, going to gear. It's acting like it's got two. Yeah, it was stuck. It had two. Felt like it had two clutches on, which a lot of times will fight the gear train. Let's look at this code again, and I'm gonna go back and explain it again. Line pressure low now is the first code, and the pressure switch rationality. Okay, so I'm gonna explain this. pressure switch clearly should not be on at the same time. We have the diagram here. The way that the computer monitors this is the battery voltage power comes from the TIPM. The computer tells the TIPM to turn that circuit on. Those TIPMs are very common for failure. Not very, very common, but they are pretty well known on the Dodges to have issues. So it ties into all these points here, and it goes down and it feeds the transmission. If at any one point one of these legs does not get power, then this control module thinks that this power leg doesn't have power from the integrated module, and it will set a code for that, and it will go into limp mode. And I've diagnosed that code many times. And as you can see in my video yesterday, this truck, I can never get it to set that code. I haven't tried to make it set that code, but obviously I've done a lot of driving and a lot of testing, and it never sets that code. I get these two codes out of it all the time. So that voltage, the computer says, hey, TIPM, turn on the voltage. The voltage turns on, the computer goes, all right, cool, we got voltage. Go down here. That feeds these. These are resistors. This is actually outputted signal to the computer. Earlier I was looking at this wrong. So power in. This is our power supply. This also feeds it feeds all the solenoids. So anyways, with these switches open, there is potential voltage and there is a signal voltage at the computer. When pressure hits these pillow switches inside the valve body of the transmission and pushes them to ground, this potential voltage goes to nothing. It goes to ground. The computer sees it go to ground. These 5 switches is how the computer knows that when it told the 2C clutch to turn on and the other switch to turn off, or the other clutch to turn off, fluid pressure goes away, opens these, other ones turn on, and so you have a different pattern of which ones have power at them and which ones don't have power at them. That is what the computer means by rationality. It starts to do a 2 shift, a second gear shift. It commands it. I feel it command it. And then it feels like it drags when it does it. And then all of a sudden you get, like we saw in the video, all of a sudden out of nowhere, you get this 4C pressure switch close. For some reason. It doesn't happen to any of the other ones, but we can clearly see that it comes on for a second. Your 2C is closed and on, and then all of a sudden 4C goes open, close, open, close. Sometimes it just closes for a second and then it goes into limp mode. I've watched it where it's like open, close, and then it's in limp mode, but it literally takes seconds. And this states right here, the DTC is set if the 4C pressure switch reads open or closed at the wrong time in a given gear. Here's your given gear. Second gear, closed, open. We see in the data screen, it comes back on, which leads me back to believe that there's an internal fluid passageway that when the 2C clutch turns on to fill that clutch, when the 2C clutch turns on, it turns on the clutch to turn on second gear. It starts to turn on second gear, but then there's fluid passage and it starts to build, which is where you feel the drag. It starts turning on another clutch, it feels like. And then you get that closure of that 4C pressure switch. And that 4C pressure switch isn't supposed to come on while the other clutch is on. It's supposed to turn off that clutch. Well, we've looked at the diagram enough. It's not supposed to do that. It's clearly, we have a cross leakage. Fluid going into another passage when it's in second gear and that 4C clutch is coming on. It's the computer sees that 4C pressure switch come on, and boom. And the absolute only time that ever happens, that I ever see that happen, is when I'm driving it and I feel the computer command a 1-2 shift, It goes 1-2 shift, boom, and then it kind of revs off a second, and it's in limp mode right away. And then when the computer detects a fault, it picks up this circuit here. It detects a failure, so it tells the TIPM to shut off the power feed to the transmission to prevent any failures. That clutch can't be on, that solenoid can't be on mistakenly if there's no power to the transmission. Default mode with any of this stuff connected, you could unplug every bit of everything from this transmission and put it in fourth gear, and it should have maximum line pressure, and it would be a gutless wonder because it's stuck in fourth gear, but you should be able to drive it without burning it down. That's why they do that. This transmission, I can already feel it. I've maybe made a half a dozen trips around the short little block right here by my house, and it's literally take off nice and easy. I'm sure we can hear the exhaust in the video. You take off nice and easy, and and then it's in limp mode, and I pull over, I shut it off, I start it back up, it goes into first gear, does a 1-2 shift, we come back to the house, we look at codes. Every single time, same thing. Never ever do I get the battery code. And yesterday, making that video, doing all that other video stuff yesterday or the day before, it had absolutely no battery code, and at no time did my voltmeter go away before the computer went into failsafe. It always had battery voltage until it goes into failsafe. And now I can watch it. Finally figured it. Now I know for sure. There's a cross leak in the transmission. The 2C clutch turns on, and it's not that the 4C switch isn't working right. It's coming on when it's not supposed to. Just can't come on when it's not supposed to. There's fluid leak. I guarantee there's an O-ring or something missing, and it's back feeding or I really want to take it apart, but I don't know what's going to happen from this point. So anyways, this video's been long enough, so we'll see what happens.